and our critics. There was moral principles before the system of ceremonial laws that, yes, included moral laws as well, because it was incorporated into it. But the system of ceremonial laws under Moses, okay, before that, there were moral principles that undergird God's moral laws. And if you take away the ceremonial system, you still got the moral law. Because it's still wrong to steal, still wrong to kill, still wrong to lie. This is what shows the difference between ceremonial and moral law, ladies and gentlemen. This is what does it. There is ceremonial law, and there is moral law.
Why herbalists always steep cinnamon in oil before brewing. Most people toss ground cinnamon straight into their hot coffee or tea.
Dr. Baldwin makes a huge deal. He made videos responding to us. He has a book, on this point as well. He argues that there's no such thing as ceremonial or moral laws among the Israelites. They did not view it that way. Now, he does say that later, those of us who are studying can detect that in essence, some laws are ceremonial, some laws are moral. His argument is that that's not how the Hebrews viewed it. To them, it was all one law. Now, that prompts the question, how does Paul view it, right? Because see, we want to talk about how the Hebrews viewed it, how the Israelites view it, how the Jews view it, how did Paul view it, and what did he say? Because Paul spoke about some laws abolished and spoke about some laws not abolished. Anyway, I grant that the phrases, the moral law and the ceremonial law, can be used interchangeably. Baldwin does a huge thing about this, and he cites a couple of verses. Fine, okay? Fine. The phrases can be used interchangeably. Actually, not the phrases moral law and ceremonial law, but the phrases God's law and Moses' law, okay? Here's a couple of texts. Romans chapter 7, in context, when it speaks about law there, I know that Baldwin goes to the Greek normal, fine, but Baldwin would agree, and Mike and others, that context ultimately determines the meaning of words, okay? Jason, if I tell you I've got groceries in the trunk, are you thinking the trunk of an elephant?
No, hopefully not. That'd be crazy.
Hopefully not.
That'd be crazy.
Right. My sentence and the context of how I'm using the sentence indicates clearly that by trunk, I mean the trunk of a car.
Of course.
Okay. So, yes, nomos can refer to the entirety of the Torah. All right. However, the context ultimately calls the shots. Romans chapter 7, when it uses nomos, it mentions 10 commandments. When it mentions the 10th commandment to indicate he's talking about the 10 commandments. Okay. However, yes, it can refer to the whole Torah. Luke chapter 2 talks about this. In comparison with 1 Chronicles 16:40, speak about the law of Moses, ceremonial law, etc. I'm not going to linger on this. The point is that we agree that the phrases can be interchangeable. But why do we continue to agree with the concept that there is a moral law and there is a ceremonial law? Why? It's very simple, ladies and gentlemen, because moral laws, moral principles existed prior to ceremonial laws. Jason, make these people understand, our critics. There was moral principles before the system of ceremonial laws that, yes, included moral law. Murder existed before Sinai. True or false, Jason?
True. Genesis 4. And it was called sin.
Genesis 4. And sin lieth at the door, God says, right?
Yeah.
So there was evidently a moral principle that said murder is wrong. Don't do it. All right. Lying existed before Sinai. Satan himself was a liar, the father of lies. Okay. Idolatry existed before Sinai, stealing, etc. Even the Sabbath before Sinai. Okay, we saw that. Here's a hopefully if you got this powerful, you appreciate this chart. In Eden, there were moral precepts. Okay, in Eden. All right. Notice, morality existed before Adam and Eve sinned. When Eve ate of the tree, of the forbidden tree, Jason, what moral principles did she violate?
Desiring something that wasn't hers, that's number 10, coveting. Taking something that wasn't hers, that's stealing. What else? I mean, she gave it to another man. She definitely killed herself and her husband.
In principle, she caused the death of herself and another individual, her husband.
Yeah. She dishonored her father, which was honoring God. She had another God before her, like obeying another God.
It was in a sense idolatry. She chose self over God. You see.
Yeah.
Now, of course, she was deceived into this, but that's what happened, right? In other words, these moral principles existed before the ceremonial law, ladies and gentlemen. Before the ceremonial law. Now, notice the chart. After they sinned, God takes an animal, sacrifices the animal, okay? And he clothes them. He rips off their covering of figs, which was insufficient because our own works cannot save us. Amen. Jesus then, I believe it was Jesus walking. It says they heard the voice of the Lord walking. I believe that voice was the Word, which was Jesus, because he was the Word from the beginning. Okay. Jesus was there. He sacrifices the animal, which represented him, and he clothes them. That is the first ceremonial act that takes place.
Yeah.
The first one. Before that, you had the Sabbath. Before that, you had moral precepts. Okay. And yet, here we have a ceremonial act taking place, which would represent what Christ would do. The lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Fast forward to Moses' time, the Israelite ceremonial law system begins. Moses is there, okay? Fast forward to the cross, the Israelite ceremonial law system, the ceremonial law ends. But what do we have after that? We still got moral laws, ladies and gentlemen. We still got moral principles, okay? This is what I believe essentially separates moral law from ceremonial law, okay? Because you have morality, you have moral precepts in existence. Jason, go to Romans chapter 2. Let me prove this with some Bible here. I showed Bible already. Let me show some more. Go to Romans chapter 2, verse 14. Watch this.
Romans 2:14.
Read this carefully with me, okay? For when the Gentiles, which had not the law, because the Gentiles were not given the law in the way the Jews were given the law. But notice, do by nature the things contained in the law. Why are they doing things by nature contained in the law, though they weren't given the law? These, having not the law, are a law unto themselves. How so, Paul? Notice what it says, which show the works of the law written where, Jason?
In their hearts.
The Gentile, who was not a Jew, because the rest of the chapter at the end goes directly to the Jews and says, you who were given the law, and he cites some of the 10 commandments, right? The Gentiles, who were not given the law in the way the Jews were given on Mount Sinai, even them are aware of the moral precepts, the principles of the law that was later codified to the Israelites. Even them. That's why Paul can conclude, for all have sinned, okay? Because both the Gentile, who was not given the law in codified form as it was to the Israelites, and the Israelites, who was given in codified form, though the principles already existed, both of them are found guilty of violating it, you see. Man from the beginning had God's moral law written in his heart. From the beginning. This is why when Eve steals, she's violating a principle that was placed in her heart. Are we understanding? This is very important. Type a 1 or an amen if you get it, if you understand what's taking place here. This is why when we go back to the chart, okay, we can see that there is indeed a separation between moral laws and ceremonial laws. Baldwin makes a huge thing about there's though the Jews interpreted them as both one unit. Fine. I don't care about that. It doesn't change the fact that these are two things here. The only thing that happened among the Israelites is that God put them all together because the ceremonial system was instituted as a temporary solution to the violation of the moral system that already existed. And if you take away the ceremonial system, you still got the moral law. Because it's still wrong to steal, still wrong to kill, still wrong to lie. This is what shows the difference between ceremonial and moral law, ladies and gentlemen. This is what does it. There is ceremonial law and there is moral law. And there is a difference between the two, even if you mingle them. It's like, to put it in practical terms, Jason, let me know if this makes sense, okay? Or let me use your house, okay, Jason? Jason, in your house, do you have some rules that are moral rules that your children have to abide by?
Yes.
Can you name one or two?
Praying before you eat. Is that
Praying.
a moral rule? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely moral. We must pray to God and communicate with God, right? Okay, so praying. Let me write that down here. Praying, okay? Very good. Now, Jason, name a ceremonial or tradition, let's say, that you practice in your house that may not necessarily be moral.
A tradition that we practice in our house. I don't know, like taking off our shoes at the front door.
Okay, I'll take it. Take off shoes. Okay, now Jason, let me ask you a question. Okay, the moral principle of praying, did that exist before you incorporated that into your family?
Of course, yeah, that was something we always did.
Of course, okay.
And we had addition to our family. They just came right along in that rule.
That rule?
Yeah, they had to learn that rule when they were born. And as soon as they were at the age of understanding, I put it on my refrigerator. This is the prayer you say, and now they got it in their heart. But go ahead. Now
the taking off of your shoes, is that a I'm gonna make a little bit of change, okay? Let me ask you this question, Jay, because I'm gonna give a stronger example. Okay, I'm thinking ahead of how the critics will respond. So let me give you a stronger example. Do you guys celebrate birthdays?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you say that's a tradition in your house?
Yeah.
Okay. So birthdays. Let me write this down. Birthdays. Okay. Now, did the birthday, okay, did it exist before your child was born?
No, my child's birthday, no. Well, the day existed, but it wasn't for them. So no.
The institution of the birthday did not exist, right?
Correct.
So now you just incorporated two things into your household, Jason. You incorporated prayer, which is a moral thing, but you incorporated can I say ceremonial law, so to speak, birthday or tradition in your property. You've got those two mingled together in a system of rules and regulations of your household with your family. But does that mean that the moral precept of prayer didn't exist prior to you putting it together and incorporated into your family system?
Oh, yeah. The moral precepts definitely existed prior. Yeah. Before.
Prayer as an institution already existed prior.
Yeah.
Morality before you tell your children, Jason, it's don't hit your brother. If you tell your daughter, don't hit your brother, okay? Or don't lie to your brother. Let's say that one, okay? Before you told them that and made that a rule in your house, guess what? That already existed. But you mingled that in with ceremonial laws, so to speak, traditions in your house. Here's what happened, ladies and gentlemen, okay? God takes moral precepts that already existed, principles, okay? Then he creates ceremonial precepts, ceremonial laws, okay? And puts them together as one unit for the children of Israel. Jason himself said, when we were asked this question, that yes, the children of Israel had one law, okay? And that was true. They did. But that does not mean that there is no separation between ceremonial and moral. That does not mean that everything, that the Sabbath began to exist with Israel when we find it prior. You can still have moral laws before the ceremonial law. And when the ceremonial law ends, the moral laws continue. That shows the separation between moral and ceremonial.
Amen. Amen. You know, it's kind of like driving a car or something like that, or maybe using training wheels. You know, like training wheels are necessary up to a certain point, but then once you really are well trained, you start to realize those are just like teaching tools to help you understand. And it's like there were certain things that God was doing to try to teach the people about Jesus, but when the reality came, those things were no longer necessary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were just stipulations that came in. So,
but you know what they do with the Sabbath? They incorporate that into it, and they say, "Well, now the reality came, and you no longer have to keep the Sabbath." The problem that Baldwin runs into, though, is that the Sabbath is a creation institution. It is not a ceremonial law, and that's why, ladies and gentlemen, this conversation about whether the Sabbath was created in Genesis or not is crucial. In addition to the New Covenant conversation, is crucial. Okay, we really need to see that. All right. On Matthew 5,